All right. Hello.
Hello, Randy.
Hello, people out in the ether. Oh, not bad. 4 minutes after 8 o'clock. So, welcome to our second in-person meeting since March 2020, and our first attempt at a hybrid meeting. And I see 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26 people in the room, plus me. And so that's pretty good. And
It's a quorum.
probably, yeah, it is actually. So we could vote off all the people who aren't here. Well, we wouldn't do that. Yeah, hang on. Well, I'll take a look to see how many people are zooming in. Anyway, this is an experiment. So we're going to have some challenges tonight. We've also had some challenges over the last 45 minutes. But this is what we are dealing with now. And that is a new opportunity to hold our meetings at UTN in an interesting room. Actually, it's quite cozy. It's a great room. And so hopefully people at home will have a chance to visit here soon. So it's a Potpourri meeting. The main reason I really wanted to hold this meeting tonight is just so that we can get all the kinks out, because 2 weeks from now, we have our annual meeting in this room, our annual general business meeting. So I'll talk a little bit about that a little later. But first, I want to introduce our first speaker, Robin Metcalfe, from York University. Who's an interesting talk, and I'm glad she's brought this forward to present to us tonight. Halley's Comet and the Proof of Gravity. So please welcome Robin Metcalfe.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah. And you've got the keyboard. There's just not enough technology here.
This is pretty amusing.
Yeah.
Doing all this work. And I'm happy to be guinea pig number 1.
Well, for you.
Not the first time. Okay, just give me a second to.
I'm just going to see if any of these works.
Okay. Can we find out if the Zoom people can hear me okay?
Randy, can you put Zoom on the screen?
Maybe just ask them to put a message in the chat if they can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Fred B.
Oh,
Randy.
sorry. Some of our members just are very needy. Yes. All good. I think you're good.
So they're saying they can hear me okay?
Yeah. Robin comes in very clearly, so does
Okay.
everybody.
Robin
in the
comes,
room.
yeah,
I
Fred
heard that.
Fred gives the thumbs up, so everything's fine.
Awesome. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, since we've all gone.
And we lied.
We just lost you.
Randy's name got muted out.
Come back to us.
Yeah, we lost the audio. They did something. They pulled the plug. I guess we're the cheap seats.
Can you hear the speaker now?
Hi,
No.
testing.
We can hear you, Randy.
I'll turn the lights back on.
Just want to make sure this is on.
They're hearing through.
Okay.
They're hearing through my laptop.
Okay, how's that? Better?
Yep, there it is.
Okay, the mic was off.
Oh,
All right, we're good, we're good. Okay,
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
fine.
let's begin with a story. Okay, sorry, but it's not advancing. We're getting so close
We
here.
are getting very close.
But I can just, there we go, it'll just advance that way. Okay, awesome, thank you. Okay, so the story. In 1687, Isaac Newton published, is the English physicist and mathematician. He published a book called Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, known by its shortened Latin name, the Principia. In that book, Newton formulated the universal law of gravity. So this is the law that tells us that all bodies are attracted to each other by a force that weakens with the square of the distance between them. And this is all bodies, whether they're on Earth or they're in space. So this force of gravity, it's something that we kind of take for granted these days, but for nearly a century after Newton's book came out, the idea of this force was treated with a lot of skepticism. And the reason why is because it's kind of creepy when you think about it. The idea that there's this invisible pull out there that can act across completely empty space, and that it can hold entire planets in their orbits around the sun from billions of kilometers away. Even Newton himself struggled with that idea, and I'll show you one of his statements about that from a letter that he wrote to a colleague. But before I do that, I should explain that when I'm teaching in class, sometimes to keep the students awake, what I do is I show a photograph of someone speaking and I animate them. So it kind of, it shocks them for a moment. There's a voiceover, and my husband is really good at doing imitations with accents. So he tends to do the voices. I know it's going to work for the Zoomers. I don't know if it's going to work for here, but we'll give it a shot. So this is Isaac Newton performed by my husband.
That one body should act upon another at a distance through a vacuum without the mediation of anything else
Okay, so
is to me so great an
working
absurdity
online,
that I believe no man who has a competent
not
faculty
here,
of thinking can ever fall into it. Gravity must be caused by an agent.
I'll explain.
But whether this
well,
agent be material or immaterial, I leave to the consideration of my reader.
Okay, so normally what happens is that his mouth moves. And so you can imagine that, like, you're in a lecture and you're falling asleep and suddenly the slides start speaking to you, right? Like it's going to wake you up. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So there's the quote. And basically, while Newton had to accept that his law of gravity worked, right? Like it accurately explained how the bodies in our solar system move in their orbits, Newton didn't necessarily accept that space is empty. He's suggesting in this quote that moving bodies may in fact be separated by some kind of material that we can't see or detect. So in any case, because of this bizarre notion of an invisible force that can act across vast stretches of empty space, the idea of gravity did not immediately gain widespread acceptance until a very special comet provided a dramatic proof that the bodies in our solar system are, in fact, driven by the sun's invisible gravitational force. Okay, now we're going to back up just a bit just to see where things stood as far as beliefs about comets in the 17th century leading up to Newton's time. So from ancient Greek times up to the 16th century, the prevailing belief about comets originating from Aristotle was that comets are atmospheric events, that they're fireballs in the Earth's atmosphere as opposed to celestial bodies in space. And that this Aristotelian notion is what's illustrated in this 16th century woodcut. So Aristotle believed this because celestial bodies were thought to be perfectly spherical bodies and that they have constant circular eternal motion. And comets don't appear to have those qualities. Unlike the planets, comets are typically seen in the sky for a few weeks or a few months, and then they seem to disappear forever. And also, unlike the planets, comets don't typically look like perfect spheres. They can have these tails, and the tails can vary in appearance from one comet to the other. So since comets don't have these perfect eternal qualities that were attributed to the celestial realm, Aristotle had to conclude that comets are transient, chaotic, unpredictable event, therefore confined to our atmosphere. So that view prevailed for about 2,000 years until the end of the 16th century, when the Dutch astronomer Tycho Brahe made very precise measurements of the Great Comet of 1577. And on the slide, you can see a drawing of this comet as it was seen over Prague, and Tycho is down in the bottom center there, and he's drawing the comet. A great comet, by the way, that's just a comet that is easily visible to the naked eye. And with Tycho's measurements, he was able to determine the parallax of the comet, meaning the comet's apparent shift in the sky due to a change in the observer's position. So parallax, this is something that we see around us all the time. And here's a simple example. Notice how the lamppost appears to be shifting relative to the background building owing to a change in the photographer's position, right? So what you can do is you can measure that apparent shift of the lamppost as an angle relative to the observer, and you throw that into some simple trigonometry, and out comes the distance between the observer and the lamppost. So Tycho was able to do this with this comet of 1577, so he became the first person to measure the distance to a comet. And he found the astonishing result that the Great Comet of 1577 was beyond the moon. So what you're looking at here is a representation of the way of Tycho's conception of the solar system at the time. And he believed that the Earth was at the center, and the moon is in orbit around the Earth. Actually, I think I can, yeah, you can see the moon. Okay, so there's the Earth, and there's the moon in orbit around the Earth. There's the sun up there. The sun was believed to be in orbit around the Earth with the planets around the sun. So the sun is carrying the planets all around, and we've just got all around the Earth, and we've just got the two inner planets there, Mercury and Venus. And based on the distance that he measured to the comet and the coordinates, he found it to be clearly beyond the moon, almost out to the realm of the orbits of the inner planets. So that finally dispelled the notion that comets are fireballs in the Earth's atmosphere. If they are beyond the moon, then they have to be celestial bodies. But this discovery didn't dispel the belief that comets are random, isolated, unpredictable events. It was still believed that comets zip through our solar system, and then they become visible to us when they get near the sun. The sun heats them up and they glow, but that after they pass by the sun, it was believed that they just zip back out of the solar system, never to be seen again, because why would they stay if there's nothing holding on to them? What finally changed that belief, at least for Isaac Newton, was another great comet, this time the Great Comet of 1680. And this comet was first sighted in November of 1680 by telescope by a German astronomer named Gottfried Kirch. So the comet also goes by the name of Kirch's comet. And this was the first comet ever to be detected by telescope, which meant that when it was first seen, it wasn't yet visible to the naked eye. So it was still quite far off from its approach to the sun. So what the comet would have looked like at that point through the telescope is sort of a brightish blurred star, which moved from night to night relative to the real stars. And by tracking the comet with a telescope, it was possible to map out on a star chart a fairly long section of the comet's path, much longer than had ever been seen before for a comet, owing to the fact that it had been caught so early in its approach toward the sun. So as the 1680 comet neared the sun, it melted and glowed and gradually became visible to the naked eye. And then in late November, the comet could no longer be seen. It just got lost behind the light of the sun. And then the comet reappeared in December on the other side of the sun in much more spectacular form. This time it had an enormous tail, so you can see an illustration of it on the side. And the comet and its tail were so bright that they could be seen during the day. So here's a documented description of the second appearance. It was seen the Sunday night right after about twilight with a very fiery tail or streamer in the west, to the great astonishment of all spectators, and is now seen every night with clear weather. Undoubtedly, God threatens us with dreadful punishments if we do not repent. So even as late as the 17th century, the appearance of a comet was still being interpreted as an omen or a message from God, because comets were still believed to be unpredictable. Many astronomers, including Newton, got out their telescopes and they tracked this comet's position in the sky from night to night. So this is a reproduction of Newton's sketch of the comet's path. And so you can see it's approaching up at the top. There's those early November sightings. And then down at the bottom, it's leaving the thick black lines, or the comet's tail. And you can see how the tail is always pointing away from the sun, because the sun has the solar wind and it pushes out on the tail. Now, at the time that Newton was tracking this comet, he had already determined that his law of gravity could accurately predict the paths of the planets in their elliptical orbits around the sun. So at this point in time, Newton had already proven that the sun's gravity is the driving force of planetary motion. He just hadn't shared that with anyone yet. So when Newton tracked the path of this comet on a star chart, he saw what looked like a segment of an elliptical orbit with the sun at one focus point of the ellipse, just like the elliptical orbits of the planets. And from that observation, Newton concluded that comets don't zip past the sun and out of our solar system forever, that just like the planets, they follow elliptical orbits with the sun at one focus point of the ellipse. But what makes comets different from planets, as you can see on the slide, is that the orbits of comets are much more elongated than planetary orbits, which are comparably more circular. Here's some more examples of typical comet orbits. Comet orbits are typically so elongated that the comets spend most of their orbit either in our outer solar system or beyond all of our planets. And so for most of a comet's orbit, we can't see it at all. And that explains why when a comet appears, it's only seen for a few months. We only see them for those little segments that bring them close enough to the sun that the sun's heat makes them glow and lights them up for us. And because their orbits are so long, it can take them hundreds to thousands of years to complete one orbit and return to the sun, which is why comets seem so random and unpredictable. Because in the average person's lifetime, it's very rare that we're going to see the same comet twice. And the orbital period of Newton's 1680 comet, by the way, is 10,000 years. So it hasn't yet been seen twice since the recorded history of humanity began. So just over a decade after the Principia was published, the English astronomer Edmund Halley, who was one of the few faithful supporters of Newton and had actually funded the publishing of the Principia, Halley was trying to promote the ideas in Newton's complicated book, particularly the idea that the spooky force of gravity is what's keeping the planets in their orbits. And Halley realized that if Newton's theories were correct, then there was a very spectacular way to prove that the planets are driven by the sun's gravity. And that was to use the law of gravity to predict the next appearance of a comet. And that, of course, had never been done before, because no one until Newton understood that comets come back every time they complete an orbit around the sun. So if a comet showed up exactly when predicted, then the skeptics would have to accept that gravity is what drives the universe. So here's how Halley went about making his prediction. And it took quite a lot of sleuthing and interesting problem solving on his part. He went through all of the historical records on comet sightings. And on the slide is an example of an ancient Chinese record of comet sightings. So you've got the text includes the dates and the locations in the sky and descriptions of what the comets look like. And what Halley was looking for in these types of comet records were comet sightings that had similar characteristics. So In other words, he was looking for at least 2 comet sightings in different years in which the 2 comets were recorded as having similar features, like similar lengths of time in which they were visible, similar speeds across the sky, similar brightnesses, similar lengths of tails, that sort of thing. And that search led Halley to 4 comet sightings with very similar descriptions. And the most striking feature that they all had in common was that they were all retrograde comets, meaning that from night to night, they moved backward in the sky compared to the normal motion of the planets, as well as most other comets. So as you can see on the slide, this is the path of Mars. And from night to night, planets and comets as well, they normally move from east to west if you track them from night to night, except for sometimes there's these brief periods, these little loops where they start moving from east to west, and that's because Earth is overtaking them in their orbit. So they have a little retrograde loop there. But normally they move from west to east, as most comets do. But with these 4 comet sightings, they were all moving in the opposite direction. And Halley correctly interpreted that as a consequence of these comets having clockwise orbits around the sun, as opposed to the counterclockwise orbits of the planet. So you can see that here. Most planets have, all planets in our solar system have direct counterclockwise motion, whereas these 4 comets all had retrograde motion or clockwise orbit around the sun. Okay, so having identified 4 comet sightings with similar descriptions, as well as all having that same rare retrograde path, Halley then calculated the number of years between each of those sightings, and he found, amazingly, that each of the 4 comet sightings were separated by a similar interval of time, 75 to 76 years. And that was very strong evidence that these 4 comet sightings were actually of the same comet, that the same object was coming back each time, which meant that this object must be trapped into orbit around the sun with an orbital period of 75 to 76 years. And therefore, this was a comet whose next appearance could be predicted using Newton's law of gravity if, in fact, the comet is connected to the sun by this eerie force. So Halley used Newton's laws to work out the date that this comet would make its next appearance, and he got a predicted return date of December 1758, as he wrote. So here's Edmund Halley, performed by my son, but only the Zoomers will actually.
In the year 1456, a comet was seen passing retrograde between the Earth and the Sun. Hence, I dare venture to foretell that it will return again in the year 1758.
Okay, it's so much cooler when the mouth, you can see the mouth moving, but whatever, maybe we'll get that for next time. Okay, right, so Edmund Halley, unfortunately, he died in 1742, so 16 years before his predicted return of the comet, but his prediction became well known. And as December 1758 approached, there was a lot of anticipation in the scientific community and beyond to see if Halley's prediction would prove to be correct. And so on Christmas Day in 1758, the comet appeared, proving to everyone who looked up that Newton had been right about comets being in orbit around the sun. Sorry, this painting got a little low resolution, but there's the comet right there. So no one could now deny the existence of this invisible force that could act across the vastness of space. There was truly a universal force responsible for all motion, both on Earth and in space, and it behaved exactly as defined by Isaac Newton. And in honor of Edmund Halley's accomplishment in being the first person to successfully predict a comet, the comet of 1758 was named Halley's Comet. And Halley's Comet has faithfully returned to us every 75 or 76 years as predicted. It was next seen in August of 1835, and then again in 1910 when it was photographed for the first time. So this is the first photograph there. And here is one of the iconic photographs from its most recent appearance in 1986, nicely showing off our advances in astrophotography. And this is another cool segment of photos of Halley's Comet from its 1986 visit. So these photographs were taken by a little space probe named Giotto that was launched by the European Space Agency. And the probe was sent to take close-up pictures of Halley's Comet and then to pass into the tail. So you see the probe approaching, passing into the tail where it was destroyed, but right before that happened, it was able to send us back these photos. And the photos revealed quite a lot about Halley's Comet, what it's composed of, its size. It's around 15 kilometers long. And today we know that's relatively large for a comet. And Halley's Comet will next visit us in the summer of 2061. Okay, I'm going to end this story with a little sci-fi-ish epilogue on Newton's theory of gravity. So according to legend, Newton came up with the theory of gravity when an apple fell on his head. Whether or not that really happened, probably not. That the legend just came out of some writing of Newton's in which he merely says he was inspired by watching apples fall from a tree in the garden of his home. So that's the symbolism of the apple tree in the cartoon. But the really interesting bit is the suggestion up at the top that the apple doesn't fall straight down and therefore doesn't entirely obey Newton's law of gravity. It's just that downward falling bit was the only path that Newton saw. So today we know that owing to the work of Albert Einstein in the early 20th century, that there's a bit of truth to the message implied by this cartoon. It turns out that not everything obeys Newton's laws. There are certain extreme situations in which we observe that the law of gravity doesn't perfectly describe the motion that we see. So for example, when something is moving near the speed of light, or when something is moving really close to a strong source of gravity, like if you get too close to a black hole, or even at a very local level, when you have a planet that is in a close orbit around its star, like Mercury in orbit around our sun. So in those scenarios, Newton's laws don't describe motion absolutely perfectly. And that tells us, unfortunately, that the law of gravity is wrong. Whereas the one theory that does seem to describe all types of motion, at least to the best that we can test it so far, is Einstein's general relativity. So why don't we ditch Newton's laws and teach and use general relativity instead? It's simply because general relativity is so much more complicated, right? So it requires like advanced knowledge of math and physics just to use it. This is actually a photograph from one of Einstein's notebooks, and it just shows like relativity theory. It's like calculus, but kind of on steroids. So we use general relativity only when we have to, only in situations where the law of gravity doesn't work. But in normal everyday situations, we can typically stick with Newton's laws. Still, though, it's kind of neat that general relativity may be the correct theory about motion and space, because general relativity has been used to make some really wacky predictions about the fabric of space. For example, there are some interpretations of the equations that predict the existence of wormholes or tunnels through the fabric of space, possibly connecting us to very distant parts of the universe. Of course, we haven't discovered anything like a wormhole yet, but if all of the other not so crazy predictions of general relativity are proven, then the crazy predictions might be true as well. We just have to figure out how to unleash them if we dare. And that is the end of my comet story.
Yay!
Yes.
In one diagram that you showed that the Copernican revolution had not taken place fully. Because there still was this notion that things were around.
Right, so that was the Tychonic model. Yes, that's right.
So at what point were comets and the understanding that they were going on the sun, did that help the Copernican revolution get set in place, or?
Yeah, so by the time of Newton, the Copernican revolution was somewhat set in place mostly by the work of Kepler, because Kepler came up with these empirical laws of planetary motion, and they worked so well, and they were Copernican essentially, that it had to be accepted at that point that that's really what's going on. So it was, by the time of Newton, it was Copernican model, or that objects move around the sun, were pretty well accepted. It was more what is driving the motion was the controversial issue. Yes.
You said that the auto was found when it went through the snail was destroyed. Was it actually that stuff destroyed or something else?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, we don't know. All we know is that we stopped receiving information. Maybe. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I should, let's ask the internet. That's a great question. I do know that that they got at measurements of the composition, which wouldn't just be from imagery. So I'm not sure what other instrumentation was on it, but something. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so
Robin, the Zoom people would like you to repeat the question.
oh, sure. I think the question was it still believed at the time that there was ether in space, right? Okay, which is a great question. And right before Newton, that was what was being taught. That was what Descartes had proposed, that there's this ether out there, and ether is what's driving the motion of the planets. It's a fluid, and by that time it was known that the sun rotates and everything rotates, and so it drags the ether around with it, creating these vortices. Planets get caught in them, and that's the cause of planetary motion. So Newton, having been taught that, decided that, okay, so what's the physics then that I can use to predict the motion of the planets? Well, it must be the laws of fluid dynamics, because it's a fluid, and we have fluids here on Earth, right? And we can reproduce a solar system in a fluid, if that's true. So he was finding that those equations were not working, and they didn't lead to Kepler's laws, and they weren't accurately predicting where the planets were. So that was what tipped him off that it can't be a fluid. But as you saw in that quote, he still believed that it's he really had trouble with that. There's nothing out there, but he just didn't know what it was. Does that answer the question? Can you? I mean, what does general relativity tell us about space? There's it's the fabric of space. In gravitational waves, are we even sure that space is empty? Exactly. So
We just know it's there.
yeah.
Interesting question I read this week was, what's the speed of gravity?
Yeah, no, these are great questions. So it was really more that what came out of this was the acceptance of Newton's law of gravity, of the math of it, not so much proving that there's no ether out there. Yeah. Anything else? Yep.
How long was it after that they started connecting comets hitting the Earth and comets missing? Was there any time spent after that?
Okay, so you're asking how much time between comets hitting the Earth, as in when our solar system was really young?
How long did it take them to realize that comets could hit the Earth and cause problems like, say, the dinosaurs disappearing, that sort of thing?
Right, which was believed to be an asteroid.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't totally understand. Maybe if someone else could interpret the question.
What is the question? When did we understand gravity enough to understand that some of these objects could actually hit the Earth?
Oh. Okay, so the question is, when did we understand gravity enough to understand that some of these objects can actually hit the Earth? So when did we realize that that these objects could be doing damage to us, or that the Earth is even a magnet for what's going on out there in space?
Or that the moon's craters were impacts
Right.
versus volcanic. That's
Right.
kind of recent.
I feel like it must be.
Yeah, Apollo time.
Right, when
During Apollo time.
that's right, when we first saw the dark side of the moon. And yeah, so it's sorry, of course. What am I saying in front of all these people?
I
Yeah.
can play that at some.
Yeah, so very, very.
50 years.
Remind me how old I am.
Does that answer your question? Oh, okay, thank you, Randy. Yes.
Extremely well done. It really gets into big time thinking on gravity and discovery. You know, is there an ether? Not ether? It's on this
Mhm. I should check that out. That sounds good. Thank you. Okay, anything else? Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you going to talk?
Thank you very much, Robin. Okay. I have, you feel free. I've tried every switch in the room. So we're going to take a break and look for a switch. My team of switchers.
Anything happening? Anything happening?
I see light moving.
Are you talking about these main lights?
Yeah,
Which
because
lights are you-
there's a lighting option here, so it comes across here. So I was trying to. Nothing seems to be happening. Oh, there we go. That's oh. That, we have to hold it for a minute, maybe? Like double.
They're probably already on.
Yeah, maybe it's just that that's this, the safety lights or something.
Know whether.
Okay.
I assume that, yeah, you can't turn, well, you must see them, right?
We can take the bulbs out.
Yeah, I thought about just. Okay.
But it's
I'm
still,
trying
we
to-
can still see it.
Okay,
I'm trying to find the share.
okay. Oh, you want to share?
I have a presentation here. I want to.
Right there, see that? Yeah, click in there. Any, up top, there, click down, there.
Okay, that's,
Now, so what do you look?
I've got this. I've got this.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you mean. No,
I want to
okay.
share, I want to share
So
this.
you want to go to the zoom control?
No.
Let's okay that, click on the zoom thing again.
Here you go.
Why is it not?
I don't know.
Sorry. Oh, wow.
Is there a reason why this projector's off on the side?
Oh, probably playing around. What I wanted to do is, can I go like that? Ooh, I can't.
Close hers.
Where's hers?
Oh, Halley.
Hey, that's here.
Yeah.
That's you.
Yeah.
And now we want a F5. And then
Yeah.
we want to,
Share.
I went, well, no, but the problem is we can't see the other screen, eh?
Yeah.
So what I did here was to do that.
Okay.
And that brings it here. But, oh, look, oh, but they see something else?
Yeah, they're seeing, well, they're seeing that version.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna work on it.
Yeah. Are we certain that that's what they're seeing?
Yes. Yeah, because I'm,
Okay. Your, this is your Zoom.
yeah, I'm Yeah, but I didn't share it. I didn't share unshare.
Randy, we're seeing
No,
the,
I'm seeing that. Oh, yeah, because Robin shared the whole desktop.
Oh, okay.
Why you don't? Oh.
We're watching that. All right, can the Zoom people hear Randy? Put
yes,
something in the chat.
yes.
Hear me clap, Randy. No.
Hello, Zoom people.
No. Oh, did you turn it on?
Oh,
No. Does it switch?
it's on.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes.
All right. So we're working Gremlins. We're not sure why the PowerPoint is being shown as the presenter's version on Zoom. We're gonna have to fix that. So anyway, I'm gonna give a short, we're gonna talk a little bit about the upcoming meeting, which is 2 weeks tonight, the annual general meeting. This is our annual, that's the new VP. Alan stepped down. Our annual business meeting will be here in this room 2 weeks from tonight. It'll be preceded by a talk by Betty and myself on our recent trip to Antarctica. He was amazing. He was. I had no idea penguins knew so damn much. He wouldn't shut up. So yeah. So we're going to share our amazing trip of a lifetime with you guys. But then that's just to entice you to come to the annual general meeting, which will be our annual business meeting. So that's 2 weeks tonight. We wanted to spend a little time remembering Terry Dickinson. Just a quick poll. People here who've met Terry? So just a few of you. Terry's had a big influence on a lot of us, and as you know, he goes back a long way. Got interested in astronomy when he was a teenager, and I wanted to talk a little bit about him. He was a good friend to me, to a lot of people, but also he was really a great ambassador for our hobby. I wrote a few things for the Sky News online article the other day, and I couldn't help but remember the term he coined for us as being naturalists of the night. I always thought that was great. But also he had a way of just when he gave a talk, he would just hypnotize you into what he was talking about, and you know, it reminded you about how cool looking at the night sky is. And he did that with people who aren't hooked. So he I'm talking from a personal my personal experiences with him, and I hope others will share tonight. I think Betty and I met him at like the second Starfest. And I remember sitting at a picnic table with him in like 1984, 1985, and we're just sitting chatting. And like, who is this guy? And it just went from there. He was an amazing speaker, amazing writer, did a lot of on-camera work with various media outlets. But his books are just perfect. I mean, when I was the executive director at the RASC, I immediately ordered a couple hundred copies of Night Watch and started selling them, and they sold like hotcakes. And I mean, I keep saying that I wish I had that book in 1970. But also working with Alan Dyer and some other people, he came out with some amazing publications. I was going through a Facebook group, Save the McLaughlin Planetarium, which of course, not going to happen. But I found this picture, and Alan sent it to Alan Dyer, and Alan Dyer sent it to his to Terry's wife Susan, and she confirmed that this is Terry. And the story was that Dr. Henry King, who was the first director of the McLaughlin Planetarium, heard Terry talk, and Terry had no background education on science, kind of like Bob McDonald. Bob McDonald's story is kind of neat because he was a truck driver and he delivered something at the Science Center one day and somehow ended up doing what he's doing. So Terry was kind of the same thing, but he was always interested in this kind of stuff. And Henry King hired him to work at the McLaughlin Planetarium. Then he became the director of the Strassenberg, which I visited for the first time in October in Rochester. And he went from there. So he's one of those guys where he just, things just fell into place. And I love this picture because, of course, even the sign isn't on the darn thing yet. And many of you may know, may not know, that I had a cable TV program in the 80s on astronomy. And having a cable program in the 80s was great because no one else was doing it. So you could do whatever the heck you wanted. So I did like over 60 programs. And we could do whatever we want. And we drove out to Terry's place out in Yarker, Ontario, and sat with him for an afternoon. And this is like mid 80s. And he just told us about what he loved and the whole idea of astronomy. And then a few years later, he was back on and in the studio in Toronto. And we talked. He was on our eclipse trip to Baja in 1991. He was always a friend of the RASC. That's a picture of him on the right in 2015. And I believe that's a picture of him on the left in about 1960 at a GA in Montreal. He's the kind of guy where I would share things with him. And I sent him a picture that I took with a remote camera of the last shuttle launch and sent it to him, just sort of, hey, look what I got. And he immediately enhanced it. And I would send him the odd astrophoto or whatever, and he'd enhance it. He'd get it going with it. And say, hey, does this look better? How does this look? So this is Terry's version of my, and he even gave me a little credit on the thing there, of the last shuttle launch. My major interaction with Terry was when he called me in early 2015 and said, how would the RASC like to buy Sky News? Because he was feeling that he'd like to step down. He wanted to get away from the deadlines of being an editor, but I think he was feeling the initial health issues that he dealt with. And also his publisher was the same. So I drove out to Kingston and we had lunch. And that's where the whole partnership and the RAC purchasing Sky News came from. So we saw each other from time to time. This was when Ivan Semenik received the Fleming Award from the Royal Canadian Institute for Science a few years ago, and Terry was there. And I think it might have been the last time I saw him. He spoke to our club in September 2004. So we were the Mississauga Astronomical Society, one of the smaller rooms upstairs. And he drove from Kingston, and there was this huge accident on 401. And he was like 2 hours late. And he'd been on the road. And I said, do you really want to give this talk? And he said, yeah. And so he got kids up and he did demonstrations with kids because there were a lot of kids in the audience. And this was Terry. I mean, he just had everyone totally, entranced. And then afterwards, he had some books to sign. And for some reason, he got Sheila to take care of the money. And Sheila looked pretty happy about it. And I know Sheila's on the call, so so he answered questions and he was very, very gracious with his time. And that was that. I love this picture because that's Terry. He would look at you that way. So those are my thoughts about Terry. And if anyone here has anything they'd like to contribute, or anyone on the call. But otherwise, I don't wanted to share that with you. So it's sad because he really was something. John, you better come down to the microphone, otherwise Fred is going to be upset. I saw you in that audience.
Yeah, I was there. I was outside waiting for him actually impatiently, and I parked his car actually. Yeah. I also had the pleasure to meet him, I think a couple of times at Starfest and talk, yeah, great guy, very easy to talk to, and excellent. But I remember him from back when I was a kid, reading his column on astronomy in the Toronto Star, actually. And then I bought his books. I think a lot of the members went through that, but at least I thought I would mention that anyway. So yeah, to me, he was one of the reasons so many of us got our introduction to astronomy, actually. And anyway, gonna miss him greatly.
Gord? Oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Wasn't he the government instigation for sort of every month or so talks in papers? They actually delivered papers or mail from the government if you signed up for it.
Oh,
long before I
Before
heard
Sky
about
News?
him in that. Yeah.
Well, he was involved with Sky News, which started out at the Museum of Science and Technology in Ottawa, and that was Mary Gray who started that. And then he took over from that, and then bought the rights to it in 1995, and that's when Sky News came out. But yes, you remember the Mary Gray article, which was called Sky News. Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, no, that was early 90s. Yeah.
Randy?
Yeah, you want to come on?
Joe, just a simple question. How many of us in this room have one of Terry Dickinson's books? I don't know.
Just one? No, just one.
We all do. Yeah, it shows the impact.
Yeah, yeah. No, he was unique. You know, he if you go look back at some of the biographies, he was he was an assistant editor at Astronomy in the early days. And there was an article, or maybe he was editor. I'd have to go back because the first editor of Astronomy, I think his name was Stephen Walther. He started in '73, then died of cancer like 2 years later. I mean, it was just like very sudden. But there was an article about what was the famous UFO thing? The couple who had the UFO abduction, and they plaid the Betty and what was the name?
Barney.
Remember? Anyway, Astronomy magazine published that, and Terry was involved, and Carl Sagan and Terry got into this big fight over the phone. And Terry told me about this because Carl did not like the article. So I don't know. It's just the thing about being an editor. But then he started up his own magazine in the 70s and late 70s, and that folded. So then he got into books. So anyway, the main thing is, as many of you know, Sky News is the only Canadian science magazine currently today. There was one in Quebec Science. Not sure if it's still around. I don't think it is. So these are challenging things to run. But anyway, anything else?
Randy?
Okay,
it's
I'm
Sheila.
going to take a little break, and we're going to get our next speakers set up. So there's some.
Randy, Sheila is
music
trying to talk.
outside, feel free, and I have no idea where the washrooms are. I didn't get a chance to find it. So if people, you gotta go upstairs?
Down the hall. Keep walking past the bookstore. There you go. No, I got a few left.
All right. Everyone go find the washroom and report back here. So we're gonna take a 10-minute break.
I think Rick is scheduled to talk at some point.
Yes, and he is,
He's remote.
yes,
The only thing I wondered about is whether we could get audio
oh, yeah.
through, would it be okay if I moved your?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
thing up here?
Oh, yeah, 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 sure, whatever.
Premature?
Huh?
Is that premature?
No, no, it's not premature at all. It's, let me get rid of these other ones. Yeah, we are really up against the, eject.
I know, sorry.
Who turned off the mic?
Well, I went through all those, I turned off the one.
Eject.
Seriously. So you removed.
All right, we can put them back in. Robin? Robin?
Yeah, it just went off on its own.
Brian, do you have a thingy?
Yeah.
I beg your pardon.
Thingy?
Yeah, thingy. Oh, God.
But he's not there.
Yeah, just got the one thing on it.
Oh,
one's at the tiny, because the Mac always throws a tiny little file.
Okay,
there,
so
too.
this one's
The
good?
bigger one, that's the one. That's the real one, yeah.
okay. Okay,
Considering it.
and
What I want to do.
telescopes for newbies?
Oh, good, you got a fire from that too.
Like, I'm fine with.
Okay. Now,
If I find a job there.
what the bloody hell?
Be careful in case you're online.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ah, we now have speak.
That is really. Testing,
Cool, all right.
testing. Testing. That's okay, testing.
There's something here called moving mode. I assume you guys tried that, right? Lighting moving mode?
I'm gonna mic you up now.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, let's start up again. I'm going to call on Brian Gibson to come down and talk about a camera project that he's been working on. How is that possible?
Cause brilliance.
Obviously, we're having our challenges, but this is real time. This is live TV.
Thanks, Randy. So for going,
Cursor?
okay,
Cursor, yeah.
that'll do. Okay. All right, here we go. So I just thought I'd give a little update on a project that I started just after Christmas. And I had no plans to do this, so I'll kind of explain that. But I think it's kind of fun. You might find it interesting too. But because of the lousy weather that we've had, which I'm sure everybody's experienced, I really haven't had a chance to run this thing through a full cycle. So what you're going to see is kind of where I'm at. And I'll have to do a part 2 once I get it fully running. But anyhow, I was aware of Raspberry Pis. I mean, I'm a computer guy from the 70s who worked in computers for 30 years plus. And I knew of Raspberry Pis, but I never had really looked into them at all. And I knew they were tiny computer, single board sort of thing. Anyhow, my wife wanted to go to the library in December to get a new library card. And so she was like, "Do you want to come along?" And I said, "I don't know, I guess. I don't really want to get a card, but I'll come along." So anyhow, we went there. And of course, I started just browsing around in the computer section while she was looking around getting her card. And I stumbled on this book. And so, of course, I pick it up. I start leafing through it. And I'm thinking, it's pretty cool. You know, this Raspberry Pi, it talked about a lot of different, I mean, when you start looking into it, the Raspberry Pis are used for thousands of different projects. You know, robotics. The one I saw in here was talking about having a little weather station and having the Pi control it. So I thought, okay, that could be kind of fun as a project. If I can get my hands on one of these things and see what I can do. Anyhow, as I was Googling around, I discovered there's an open source project called AllSky. And it was written by a guy who, I think he's in Finland or Norway. And it's open source, it's freeware. Lots of people, probably thousands of people have used this software on the Pi with a camera. And basically to set up an AllSky camera so that you can run it all night on its own. It'll collect the images. It'll create a time lapse at the end and various other things. And a lot of people even have it going to their website. So they could have it set up at their observatory, monitoring the sky. I originally thought about that for my observing location up in Thornbury, where I go all the time. So that's kind of what I had in mind at first. It'd be kind of nice to have that up there. I could check the weather. But it gets a little more complicated if you're going to have it out year round because you've got heat issue, you got to keep the thing warm, clean, all that sort of stuff. Anyhow, this is the Raspberry Pi that I got. I'm not going to go through all the specs, but that just shows you, like, you can see the size of it here. It basically is not much bigger than a credit card, but it has the next picture that shows this is what it looks like when it's all put in the case. So it's a little kit. It's like $200. You assemble it. You don't have to be a computer geek to assemble it because it's just a few things you have to put together. And then you don't even have to hook up, even though it's got HDMI ports and you can plug in a keyboard and a mouse and everything else to it. For this project, they were suggesting that you just load a version of Raspberry Pi OS, which is Linux, and that you use the version without the graphic interface to save space. So that's what I've got on this one. But it's a 4 gig computer. You can see all the ports and everything. It runs off a USB-C 5-volt power pack. And all I do is plug in the camera into the USB 3 port. So the key thing with this is this one comes with no OS. So you have to go back to your old days of, using a terminal and console. And what I'm actually doing with this one is I just connect to it over Wi-Fi from my MacBook. So you can have a terminal session, remote into it, and basically load all the software and do everything that way. So for the camera, I decided to use one of the ZWO cameras. So this software supports those, but Raspberry Pi also has a camera. And there's an actual interface on the board that you can plug a camera in. And that would be better if you're going to have everything in one box. You could have the Raspberry Pi and the camera together. My idea was to have the Pi separately, run a USB 3 cable, 16 feet, so I can put this thing up on my upper porch. And still have a little Raspberry Pi to sit inside and collect the data. So the box and the little clear dome was just Amazon, 25 bucks. And figure out how to mount the camera inside. I just made a metal bracket so that you could literally use those. And I also had to get a special USB 3 cable. They call it an active extension cable. It's not powered, but it has electronics in it to boost the signal. And so I learned that as well. But I've gone right through, got it set up, software's loaded, and I've just got a couple of screens to show you. Even though I'm using a console to load the programs and edit some of the files, once you launch the software, and this process, it's so well documented. There's YouTube videos that walk you through the whole thing. If you go to these, will a copy of the slides be? I guess they'll be recorded. Yeah, so the links I've got on there, those 2 links would get you everything you need. Once you go to the GitHub site, the software, all the instructions, step by step, it's all there. That's just showing a terminal site. Enjoy that. Anyhow, when you launch the software on the Pi, and this is from my Mac, I just took screenshots from the Mac. It's just like a browser application. And it's really well polished. So this is their administration panel. You see the menu down the left. So I just took a couple of screenshots to kind of give you an idea how it looks when you fire it up. It's really configurable. So you go through and configure your camera, your latitude, longitude, what you want to do. There's a script editor. So Alan probably familiar with those old stuff. You can configure, you see I've got the camera there, ZWO. And then that's kind of what it looks like with the clouds in my office. So, that's, again, on the left side, I'm clicking on live view. And you see what it says. That's, again, a default setting. But this would actually, based on your latitude and longitude, it'll start up the camera just at night, or it'll go day and night. And it knows the difference with sunrise, sunset. So it will take longer exposures every 60 seconds through the night. But my idea is to run it like when there's a clear night with a meteor shower and just let it run all night and then see what kind of time lapse it generates. And there's also one last slide, I think. There's web software too. There's a website. Now I could add it to my website, but right now I've got it just running on the Pi. So if you go here, this is what it looks like running as a website. So it's got a message up there because I haven't run it in so long. It hasn't run a full session. But basically, the buttons on the left that you can see at the top, those are your options to go through different time lapse. Top one is really cool because if you click that, it would overlay a star chart. And so it actually shows you all the stars, the brighter stars, overlaid on your AllSky image. And again, even that's configurable. Yeah, you have to configure it based on how you've got your camera oriented. But anyhow, that's where I'm at so far, hoping for some clear nights during meteor showers or even a nice aurora display to see how it works. But like as I said, all from a trip to the library. Any questions? Yeah. Yes, what I'm doing, like the little Pi I have there, I've never plugged a keyboard or mouse or anything into it. It's basically, as soon as it boots up, it connects to my Wi-Fi. So I'm on the same network. So from the Mac, I'm using SSH and just logging into it. And once I connect to it, I could open a terminal session and update the software, whatever. Well, yeah, it's like it's got a host name. You know, I've given it its own name, and I've got a login. You can have multiple logins, but it's amazing. Like that little Pi would do everything. You could run Office stuff on it. You could, I'm amazed in something that big, what it could do. And when you start looking at what people use them for, it kind of blows you away. Exactly. I was going to mention that I use the ASI Air, and it's basically a Raspberry Pi, you know, just customized for that purpose. But, you know, it's exactly what it is. And what it has, I didn't mention it, there's a 40-pin panel on the board. And I'm using it only to run the little fan. But you can use that to interface with any kind of hardware. So if you wanted like a home automation system or anything, that's what they wire off of. So you got full control. Yep. Yeah, I wasn't, I couldn't hear it.
You could build a thing to try to build a tracking mount with it.
Well, if you look at,
Repeat.
okay, yeah, the question is, can you use it to do an automated tracking system? I think I don't know if you're familiar with the ASI Air. You know what that is? An ASI Air? An ASI Air, basically, when you look at all the functionality, it's a little box like that you put on your telescope. You control it from your iPad, and basically you can pull or align. You can do your whole image sessions. It'll do meridian flips. It'll control them out, do go-tos. It does everything, all in a box no bigger than that, really. So, right, create your own or whatever. What's that? Okay, Astroberry, yeah. Right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like I said, I hadn't really given it much thought, but once I saw, you know, what people were doing with them, and then stumbling on this AllSky site. And there are, I think, well, you probably know, there are places that sell AllSky cameras too. You can get one already made as a kit, right? I don't know if you have ever looked into that, but yeah. Okay.
And there's a website, allskycamera.com, that's out of the UK.
Yep, that's right. Well, the Raspberry Pi 2 is basically from the UK.
Yeah.
And there's even one, again, because I was having so much fun with it, I bought a second Raspberry Pi. Because this one I don't have the graphical interface loaded on it, but there's another one called the Pi 400 that basically is a Pi in a keyboard with a mouse. And so you have everything but a screen. So it has everything. So it's the same thing. It's preloaded with the operating system. And again, I just got one of those just to play with the graphical interface.
They were impossible to get. Are they now?
This was through Amazon. Now I think I'm paying a lot more than you would to get them the other way, but a lot more as in $200 instead of $100. I think a Raspberry Pi is supposed to be about $100. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I better go back to Randy before he drags me off.
Thanks, Brian. So our next speaker is Rick, but he's on Zoom, and I don't know how to we haven't been able to get audio from people remotely.
There's different audio options.
Well, I don't know if we're going to spend time.
Yeah.
Let's spend
somebody talk on Zoom.
Okay, so let's get, Rick, can you share your screen
Yeah, I can do that.
and continue to talk?
Okay.
Volume.
Okay.
Be careful because you'll get
Oh, there's
feedback.
There's audio source.
Okay. Can you see that? Right. How do I get rid of this here? Oh. Okay, can you see that, Randy, and hear me? Anyway, I hope you can. So I'm going to talk about my experiences in photographing the Comet C 2022 E3 ZTF. So a little bit about the Comet nomenclature, because it's a bit strange.
You guys can
So-
hear us, that's fine, but we need to.
I thought one.
And, oh, Wendy, are you saying Zoom can hear Rick?
Yeah, because he's talking on Zoom. The
Yeah.
problem is feeding the Zoom
Okay.
from here.
We
So-
hear Rick just fine. Okay, so finally the Zoom people hear something that we don't hear.
Can you turn your laptop up to the high volume? That might work. Put the microphone on the laptop.
Yeah, if you put the microphone
God,
on
you
the
guys are
laptop,
good.
it'll work.
All right, Rick, are you speaking?
Yeah, I'm speaking now. Can you hear me?
Not hearing. Oh.
Are you hearing me?
Start video. Why am I not hearing it?
Just
You
a
don't
sec.
want me. And-
Do I have not
That's
have
for me
my?
going in here, but I
No.
want to hear him.
Okay. I know it's a Mac.
Rick, can you sign?
Sorry.
Rick, you're muted. Rick, you're
He's muted.
muted.
How can they hear him if he's?
I don't
muted?
know.
Okay, just
Well,
Ask to
ask
unmute.
Rick, can you unmute? He's talking. I can see his mouth moving.
We see Rick's screen just fine. We hear Rick just fine.
Yeah.
Is your sound?
No. It says muted. Rick
Oh.
on here said muted, but they hear him.
What happened?
They're Zoomers.
You're an IT.
Yeah.
just a second.
Okay.
Can you hear me
So
now?
that is the button to say.
Can you hear me
mute.
now?
Don't mute
So
him.
he's not muted.
All
Are you
right.
hearing
okay.
me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Rick.
Okay, but only online?
What the hell is that?
So you don't.
So Randy, you can't hear me yet?
Zoom hears us. We don't hear Rick. All right.
So you
that's
can't hear me at all?
but that doesn't affect us hearing Rick.
No. So the key is your sound off?
No. Huh?
Yeah, so
It is. I have a Zoom session.
you
I've been
can't hear me on
controlling
your
the Zoom
We're not,
session here.
you're not looking at what we're seeing.
Yeah.
He's on Zoom on this computer.
Like I've been letting people in and telling Sheila to
Oh, you,
calm down.
Yeah.
I noticed, Randy, I noticed you had both a
This is-
host and
all right.
co-host.
Okay, are there multiple speaker systems?
No.
Okay. Yeah, let's do a test audio. That window again. Oh, okay, yeah, it's good.
Randy, you were,
Yeah. How do you do?
Okay.
I hear nothing.
My audio's not working.
Okay, we agree that. You know why?
Oh, for goodness sakes. Rick, say something.
yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Rick,
Yes,
why was
I'm
that in
trying.
here? Why was that in here?
Still can't hear me?
I hope you all like hot chip.
Randy, you can't hear me?
Rick?
Yep.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm
Who the
hearing an
hell?
echo now. Randy, you still can't hear me? No.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we hear you.
Oh, you hear me?
Yes, finally.
Oh, that's awesome.
Why was that plugged into?
No, hold on though. That's through here,
Yeah.
so where's the best sound? It comes out of there,
Okay.
right?
Right. Speak loudly.
Yeah, okay. How's that work?
Everyone hear him? All right, go.
Okay, great.
We're not
Yeah,
touching
so-
anything else.
Okay, yeah, so before I talk about my photography of this comet, I just want to talk a bit about the nomenclature because it's kind of strange. So the C means this is a non-periodic comet, but that just means its period is over 200 years. It doesn't necessarily mean it won't come back. And the nomenclature of 2022 E3 is because it's the third comet discovered in the fifth half month of March 2nd, 2022. So the months are like A and B is January, C and D is February. So March 2nd is E. So that's how you get the E3. And then ZTF means it was discovered with the Zwicky Transient Facility at Mount Palomar. So there you go. And the other thing is it's been called the circumpolar comet, as it was always above the horizon for us. But that's actually no longer true for us. So if you want to see a circumpolar comet and you haven't seen it yet, I guess you're not going to see it, even though it's still in the sky. Okay, so I got this from the Sky Live, which is a really nice site. So this shows the trajectory of this comet. The comet actually has taken about 50,000 years to arrive from the Oort cloud where comets are born. But the outbound trajectory actually looks like it won't be back for at least millions of years. Or in fact, it may be ejected totally from the solar system, never to return. So I guess we'll see. As far as finding a comet, I find the SkyLive is a really nice site. And in fact, all I did is went into Google and searched SkyLive Comet C2022 E3. And then you go into Google and you click on the site and it comes up with the comet and there's an interactive map there and you can just click on that. And then it comes up with this screen here. On the top left, you can click and put in Mississauga, and then you can click on the time and it comes up with this window at the bottom and you can just dial in any time you want, now or in the future, or in the past, and it shows you where the comet is on this nice map. So you can use the map itself. I have a computerized telescope, so I just put in the RA and declination coordinates and so the comet's right there. So that way there's no trouble actually finding it. Okay, so this is sort of the raw data for the comet, if you will. It actually shows the comet's relative motion versus the stars over about 2 hours. So I did 30-second exposures, and what you're looking at then is I'm tracking the stars. The comet's moving relative to the stars actually quite quickly. And so if I align all my images over 2 hours, so the comet is in the same place in the center, then you're going to see from each of those exposures, you're going to see the stars as they were at that time. And they form this nice pattern, which sort of looks like Skylink or something, but it's actually the comet passing by the stars. So this is the raw image. The problem is it's hard to see the comet with all these stars here. So what I did then is take this and put it into Photoshop and used a program called Star Exterminator to remove the stars to get my final image. And so this is the final image that I got. And I'll talk about my telescope in a minute. But at this point, just to point out that this diagonal is about 1 degree across. This was taken on January 31st from about 11:30 to 1:37 a.m. on February 1st. And that actually is the closest approach to the Earth. So it's very fortunate because It's about the only clear night I had around that time, and it was actually at closest approach. And this is actually 215 images of 30 seconds each over 2 hours. And they're all combined to give this image. And then I put the stars back in, and I had to choose a time. So I just chose 11:37 p.m. So that's what the stars are here. So you can see how the comet looked, if you will, at 11:37 p.m. Now I took this image using my L-enhanced light pollution filter because particularly to the north for me, the light pollution is very bad. There's a street light and a bright neighbor and so on. But the good thing is the filter allows the green to come through very well. The green is from diatomic carbon, C2. It fluoresces, excited by the UV light from the sun. But the excited C2 molecules are unstable. So they don't ever get out into the tail. They always stay close to the nucleus in the coma. So the green color, you don't see it coming out of the tail because the molecules just can't survive that long. The reddish, and it's harder to see, but there's a reddish white around here, and that's from dust coming off the comet that's scattered by the sunlight. Dust is scattering the sunlight. And there's also, and it's really hard to see, but going from the nucleus down to the lower left, there's the ion tail. It's actually blue in color, and that's due to excited CO+ ions, but it's really only barely visible in this 2-hour exposure. And then using that same set of data that I showed you, I also did this animation. So again, what I'm doing is taking each of those individual comet images, actually there's 38 frames, and each of those images, then the stars in a certain location, and I just put them all into Photoshop, align them all, and now you can see how the comet's moving relative to the stars. And you can see it's quite a significant amount of motion in the 2 hours. Because like there's a star here that starts out somewhere off the field, comes in, and ends up by the end of the 2 hours up here. So at least a degree or so of motion in the 2 hours for the comet. And so that's what I had to share on my imaging. So just a little bit about my setup. I have a Celestron C925 SCT telescope, so it's 9.25 inches aperture. I run it at f6.3. I have a CME 70 EC computerized mount and a home-built dolly for that, and also a home-built dolly for my laptop, which I use for the acquisition. I have an Astro camera, a ZWO 2600 color camera, and I use SharpCap for image capture. There's a free version of that, but I use the pro version because it also enables me to do polar alignment. I use another free program, Deep Sky Stacker, to calibrate, register, and stack all those exposures. And it has a comet stacking mode, which is obviously very useful. You want to capture a comet. And finally, I did my image processing using a program called Star Tools and also in Photoshop. Photoshop does enable you to do GIF animations, is what is the animation I showed you. There is a free program, PIPP, which does animations, but it's automatic, like it does the alignment itself. And I find automatic for comets doesn't work very well because they're so fuzzy. So doing it manually in Photoshop was a pain, but it works much better. So any questions? If we can figure out how to do those.
Seems easier to take photos of, hang on, I'm gonna mute myself here. Seems easier to take. It is definitely easier to take photographs of comets than run these kinds of programs. Any questions for Rick? Somebody said good. right, thanks, Rick. Thanks very much for sharing.
Okay.
Clap,
you're
clap,
welcome.
clap, clap, clap.
Yeah, thanks for getting it working.
All right, if you want to unshare, and we're going
Trying
to
to do
get
that.
our last presentation up here, which is there was a request for okay. There was a request for information on, okay, we're going to go with this. Choosing a new telescope or a telescope for people who are new to the hobby. And so Keith Jarvie has volunteered. So I'm going to ask Keith to just give us a second to see if the Zoom people still hear us. Zoom people, please tell us, do you hear us?
Yes, we
Yes.
can
All
hear
right,
you.
Keith, you're up.
Oh, and arrow keys will take me forward and backwards.
Yep.
There's a 10-minute talk, which I'm going to try and do in about 5 minutes, because the goal was to have an opportunity for newbies to take advantage of the 10,000 years of experience accumulated amongst the group here with regards to telescope choice and things to see in the sky. That's the Dunlap Observatory Telescope, something you might wish to get, but probably won't. Learning from experience, this is my experience. Way back in August of 2002, Mars was going to be at its closest. So,
We're seeing this, but we're not sharing it.
oh, okay. Maybe I'll just continue chatting while the AV stuff gets sorted out. 2002, Mars was going to be as close as it had been in 60,000 years. There's a lovely picture there of Neanderthals around the campfire.
Okay.
Try that again. Okay. Hard to tell in the case with this little thumbnail sketch. There's actually a reddish dot up there, and 80% of the Neanderthals don't see it.
Nice.
There's 2 people off in the corner who happen to be taking it in. So again, those are our forebears, I guess, in amateur astronomy. Influenced by this, I did what anyone would do. I went out to a great Canadian retail store. The original version of this had the logo in place, and I thought, hey, we're putting this stuff online, so they might have some difficulties. So now it's just a great Canadian retail store. I found a telescope there that was 525 power, and the amazing thing was it was on sale for only $205. Of course, I bought it home. Took about 3 hours to set up. This was approximately the view I got of Mars. The lowest power gave me something that looked like a disc. There was 2 other eyepieces with it, and they were completely useless. I could not see anything useful. I'm a terrible poker player, and what amazed me is I walked in the door, and within seconds, my wife goes, "What's the matter?" She could tell from the telegraphing of my body image that I was not very happy with the purchase. The great Canadian store takes things back, which is really great. So it didn't cost me anything other than experience. However, what I learned from that was the value of learning from experience. I brought as a prop my value of night watch along. This is my chance to give an homage, albeit brief, to Terence Dickinson. I spent 6 months reading this book cover to cover. I knew at that point that this was a hobby. I was, early 40s, mid 40s at this time. I knew at that point this was a hobby that I really did want to get into. If it was worth the 6 months to read the book, then it was worth what I ultimately spent, which was about 10 times more than that, almost, in buying my first real telescope, which is the product. My daughter made this shirt. That's the scope on the shirt. Things I really loved about this book, I mean, obviously it's very accessible. You've read Terence Dickinson's work before, but he starts off by giving you a sense of where we are in the cosmos. And that's really very useful. And that takes you then to the seasons, and the fact that as the seasons transit, we're looking at different places. Then he goes into giving a very good description of stargazing equipment, and then goes on to give some more specific chapters. So a really wonderful book to have. The bottom part there just said that what you want to see, I think, is a very strong determinant of the sort of telescope you might want to get. Now, there's lots of resources available. And I wanted to start off with our own national site. There's a spot there in Ask RASC where an astronomer will answer questions for you. Not surprisingly, the very first question is, I've got $500 to spend on a telescope. What do you suggest I buy? Things I'm highlighting here, this agrees with Terence Dickinson. If you have a limited budget, the first telescope you may want to buy is a pair of binoculars. Generally very useful. You can use it for more than astronomy, great broad views of the sky, and a great way to help you learn the sky, but also see so much more than you can see with your naked eye. Mentions down there at the bottom that a go-to telescope costs about $2,000 these days. The problem is learning the sky and learning how to use the telescope are two very steep learning curves to take on both at the same time. We're not talking about astrophotography here. This is just learning the sky and learning the mechanics of the telescope. So patience is always a virtue when it comes to a new hobby, and certainly is the case, and more so with astronomy. Our own center, if you check under the member benefits up there, one of the benefits of being a member of the club, because you can come to these meetings free of charge, but if you're a member of the club, you can participate in the telescope loan program. So we have two Dobbs, a Schmidt-Cassegrain Celestron, and a Skywatcher refractor there, all available for club members to rent free of charge. In this way, if you don't have a scope, you can get one, take it out, try different scopes, see what sort of fits your lifestyle and your interests. For visual learners, there's an awful lot available online these days. Trevor does great videos. He came and gave a talk to the group here, very well attended. He, as maybe a second generation of someone like Terry Dickinson, is doing a great job to popularize astronomy, and proud to say that he's one of our own, lives in this area. The next one down there is Kelly Beattie, who writes for Sky and Telescope and other things. What I liked about his video is he mentions if someone came to you and said, I want to buy a car, what car should I buy? Use that as an analogy for the telescope. Obviously, it depends on a lot of stuff. What do you want your car for? Where do you want your car to take you? I would argue the same applies. Where do you want your telescope to take you? And then down at the bottom is a fellow named Ed Ting. And he's got quite a few videos as well. I saw several of those. A few excerpts from those. Trevor recommends a tabletop or classic 8-inch Dobsonian. He is a really great astrophotographer to my mind. I'm not an astrophotographer. So start with visual astronomy first. Gives a very strong recommendation on that. The cost goes up and the complexity goes way up, and there's no instant gratification associated with astrophotography. A lot of folks, I think, are drawn because they see the beautiful pictures and I want to do that. Spend some time with an astrophotographer and you'll find out that to get there, it takes an awful long time. It's an awful lot of work, an incredible amount of skill. For Kelly Beattie, again, what do you want to do with this? He also mentions the tabletop Dobsonian as a great start. Brings home the point that it's not magnification. 525 power is not what you're looking for. Actually, most of the time you are much lower magnification than that, but the diameter of your optics do matter because it's light gathering power. And the value of upgrading eyepieces, because generally the scopes you buy will come with lousy eyepieces. And down at the bottom for the budget conscious, again, binoculars are a great way to start. He mentions 3 scopes. This is in increasing order of his recommendations. So the third was an Orion short tube reflector or a Star Blast tabletop Dobsonian. So again, very similar to what Trevor had recommended. The middle one, I think, was a 5-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. I guess the folks at home can see that. We cannot. And his top recommendation was actually an 8-inch Dobsonian. He mentioned specifically Orion. And if you go back to the pictures that were taken of the club scopes, I don't know if those are accurate, but they are Orion scopes. So that would be the #1 choice for Ed Ting. What you want to look at. The quotes here are all taken from Terence Dickinson's book, Night Watch. So in terms of, if you're interested in the sun, the planets, bright objects, things you can see from the city, he mentions about a 3 to 7-inch apochromatic refractor, unsurpassed for consistently fine lunar and planetary performance, if you can afford one. And it mentions the cost of these is around about $2,000 for an apochromatic. But a favorite for astrophotography. If you're interested in dark sky, you need more aperture. Deep sky objects, so nebulas, star clusters, and galaxies. 10-inch or larger Newtonian reflector. He mentions on an equatorial mount, but then references a Dobsonian mount as being very popular as the most economical way to see faint fuzzies, and says 6-inch to 8-inch are especially recommended. These will come with a couple of eyepieces, generally for about $650. And the last of the ones, and again, comparable to the one that we have for loan, is an all-around good performer, is a Schmidt-Cassegrain. He mentions 5-inch to 16-inch. I have an 8-inch. I'm in my mid-60s at this point. I'm okay with an 8-inch scope. A 10 or a 12-inch, 16-inch. It's a large telescope. So you've got to keep in mind that it's going to be a fair amount to manipulate, and the weight that it will tell you in the catalog is only half of a guide because they're sort of a cumbersome thing to manipulate around, and you don't want to drop them, of course. Mentioned the go-to scope here, 5-inch would cost you about $1,300. Prices all go up from that. Key considerations. Deep sky, which is what I tend to prefer to do, is very challenging in cities. You can spend an awful lot of time looking for things and not finding them. I've done that myself many, many a night. So you end up having to get out of the city. The shot there on the left-hand side is taken up at Black Creek on the Bruce Peninsula. And the shot there from 2007 with my 8-inch Meade was taken up in Manitoulin Island. So the reason I bring this up, other than just the glory of my wonderful pictures and how I've changed over the years, you're gonna have to travel with your scope if you want to see faint fuzzy objects. So you're gonna have to pack that thing, drag it around, be comfortable taking it out of your vehicle, setting it up, taking it down in situations where it may be frigidly cold out, and in cases where there may be lots of bugs around. The best telescope is the telescope you will use, not the one that looks great in the catalog or the one that necessarily seems like the thing that you want. This was just intended to be an intro. I don't tend to moderate this myself, but lots of members in the club have tons of experience. I bought one telescope, I won one, I bought a nice pair of binoculars and a cheap pair of binoculars. I'm sure there's people here that have bought many, many scopes in the course of their lives. If any of the newbies have questions, I'm sure people would be delighted to entertain those questions. For anyone online, because actually one of the individuals, Jake, who started this discussion, I know is online, assuming he's hanging in, so hopefully we can manage both ways of interaction. Questions? Anyway, thank you.
I think this is a topic we're going to have to continue with at future meetings. There's a lot to dig into, but I want to thank Keith for starting us off. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so we should probably close things off for now and definitely put this on the agenda for our next meeting. So thanks very much, everyone here and everyone online for participating in our experiment. I think we're going to have another simulation before next time so that we can get all the bugs out. We sort of did some real time debugging. But I think it can work. And I think these days we are going to have to set up a way that we can invite people on Zoom to present to the club, because there's a big benefit of that. So thanks again, everyone. Is there any questions on the chat before I close? Well, no, that's not real because I don't see 15. Yeah, but Wendy says she loves the line that the best is the one you use. Yeah. No, I dealt with all of the others. That's not real.
They haven't seen the 15.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. So thanks, everybody. So 2 weeks from tonight is our annual meeting with a premiere of Betty and Randy's amazing Antarctic adventures. So bring your pet penguins, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks very much. Well, we have to stop it and hang on. Don't do anything, because I have to. Can you unshare the screen there? Okay.